So I'd like to firstly introduce our first speaker, Anne Delaney. Anne is going to talk about electrifying Australia, the importance of home and business electrification. Anne is an award-winning documentary, filmmaker, journalist, and many other things, including a project manager and artist. She's held various positions in the ABC, SBS, independent film and production companies, the Australian Government, the World Bank, and lots of other things. So would you please welcome Anne Delaney.
Thanks, Anne, and also thanks to the team here at Zero Emissions Noosa for inviting us. I have to say, our accommodation is very delightful. It's very nice. Look, I'd also like to acknowledge the Kabi people who are the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Before I begin, I'd like to tell you what I'm not. I'm not an electrician, I'm not an engineer, and I'm not an economist. What I am is a curious journalist, and I like to ask questions. Over the past few years, I've spoken to hundreds of people, electricians, engineers, network operators, ministers, researchers, business owners, and also ordinary Australians trying to make sense of the energy transition. So what I can share tonight is a synthesis of what I'm hearing, what I'm learning from the people who are building, regulating, studying, and living this transition. So let's start with the good news. Australia has become the world leader in rooftop solar. More than 4.3 million homes now have solar panels. That's approximately 1 in 3 Australian households. No other country comes close to that. Our total rooftop solar capacity now exceeds 28 gigawatts, more than the country's entire fleet of coal-fired power stations. Our biggest power station isn't in the Hunter Valley, it's on our rooftops. Now, let's add batteries. The launch of the government's Cheaper Home Batteries program in July last year turbocharged battery installations. The numbers have exceeded every forecast, every model, every prediction. Australia has passed 400,000 home battery installations. That's 11 gigawatt hours of distributed storage. And I tried to calculate this, I'm hoping I'm right. That's about 7 Waratah super batteries, the biggest battery of any type on Australia's grid. It's a great example of government policy matching consumer readiness, demand, need and sentiment. The take-up of batteries has even surprised AEMO, the Australian Energy Market Operator. They'd assumed that batteries would need to be orchestrated at scale through virtual power plants to deliver meaningful benefits for the grid. They would have to be coordinated and controlled by the industry like an orchestra. But less than 10% of battery owners have joined a VPP, and yet these batteries are delivering benefits to the grid. They're reducing evening peak demand and lowering system costs without being enrolled in VPPs. Now the lesson isn't that VPPs don't matter, the lesson is that households matter, and they matter a lot. Because households are effectively saying, I'll take control of my own energy. And they're doing it because the grid feels expensive, fuels feel volatile, and the alternatives are viable. Electrification is no longer a climate story, it's an economic story and a cost of living story. Saul Griffith, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, describes what we're witnessing as the largest infrastructure project in Australian history. The centre of gravity in our energy system is shifting from the big generation plants to millions of devices in homes, businesses and depots. But unlike previous infrastructure revolutions, the assets aren't being built by governments or corporations, they're being bought by families. I'm talking about home generation here. And they're doing it because the economics have changed. Rewiring Australia's recent electrification tipping point report found Australia has crossed a threshold where electrification is no longer a trade-off between climate action and saving money. The two are now the same thing. The average fossil-fuelled household could save around $4,100 a year by fully electrifying. That's more than $60,000 over 15 years. But here's the thing about a transformation at this scale that is working in part. It inevitably creates problems, new problems. Problem one, the benefits aren't reaching everyone. The electrification dividend is real, we know this, but right now it's flowing primarily to Australians who already have advantages. Homeowners with higher incomes and access to capital. Wealthier households are capturing more capacity, more savings and more resilience. At the same time, Energy Consumers Australia reports that 1 in 5 Australian households is either vulnerable to or experiencing energy hardship. We're at real risk of creating a two-speed energy transition. One for those with capital and a roof, and another for everyone else. Problem two, renters are locked out. Approximately 1/3 of Australians rent, and they face a structural barrier, the split incentive. Landlords pay for upgrades and own the assets. Tenants receive the bill savings. Several agencies argue that minimum rental standards are the most important equity measure that we now need. It's the rental equivalent of seatbelts, if you like. Rather than allowing landlords to rent out cold, drafty homes with inefficient appliances, minimum standards would ensure every renter has access to a basic level of comfort, health and energy efficiency. But that comes down to political will, and we still have a patchwork when we need a national standard. There are promising innovations emerging for renters though, portable batteries that renters can take from home to home, cloud solar products that give renters access to the benefits of solar generation regardless of where they live, plug-in balcony solar systems which are already really big in Germany that don't require major structural work or landlord approval. Problem three, apartments are still a hard case. For apartment residents, that's around 15% of the population. The barriers are even more structural. Solar and batteries require approval from owners, corporations, bylaws have to be navigated, along with uncooperative or disinterested neighbours. Strata governance is complex and legal advice is often needed. There's some progress though on the apartment front. New South Wales and Victoria now offer grants for apartment solar. And New South Wales has removed the strata blocking vote on EV chargers and rooftop solar. So only a simple majority is needed rather than the 75% super majority. And technology is helping. Most of the apartments that have accessed state grants are using something called SoulShare. It's developed by the Australian company Loom Energy, which allows electricity from a single rooftop solar system to be shared between multiple apartments. Just last week I actually spoke to the co-founder of Loom after they launched what they're calling SoulShare 2, which has added a shared battery storage to the solar, and he says this could potentially lift annual savings to around $756 per apartment. But solutions like that need to become mainstream. Problem four, the gas network death spiral. Gas is retreating fast. The EMO forecasts residential gas demand falling by around 1/5 just over the next 5 years. And modelling by ClimateWorks suggests that electrification combined with energy efficiency improvements could cut residential gas demand by 64% over the next decade. Again, we have a structural problem, the gas death spiral. The danger isn't that gas declines, the danger is that the decline is chaotic and unmanaged. We've seen what that looks like in regional Victoria, where more than 1,000 households face gas closures operated by Solstice Energy. And they found themselves being pushed towards LPG, not to electrification. Many were blindsided, many couldn't afford to upgrade. On the other hand, Esperance in Western Australia, they did it differently, and by most accounts successfully. This was a town that made a planned, coordinated transition off gas, where the energy company dealt directly with every single household, and the government bankrolled the transition, in the main, onto electrical appliances. The gas death spiral is inevitable. The chaos that comes with an unmanaged version of it isn't. Problem five, The grid net needs to get smarter, not necessarily bigger. A common fear about electrification is that it will overwhelm the grid. Everyone charging EVs at 6 p.m, everyone running heat pumps and induction cooktops and electric hot water systems at once. And it's a reasonable concern. I spoke to the GM for the, what's his title, Future Grid at Endeavour Energy last week. This is the network partner on the Electrify 2515 project. And they're in the process of electrifying a whole community on the New South Wales south coast. It's 500 homes. And it's a real-life pilot that's showing how electrification can be done. He's confident that even if electricity demand doubles over time, we don't need to double transmission infrastructure. What we need is smarter coordination. When EVs charge, when hot water systems run, how batteries interact with the grid, and how to shift demand. How, basically, to consume energy intelligently. But again, there's a catch. Some households and businesses could be locked into proprietary ecosystems when they buy solar batteries and EVs from different manufacturers. These products can't easily talk to each other or can only communicate with certain retailers. Interoperability, they call it. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about that. Electrify 2515 is also revealing that most householders need much more support to electrify. Energy upgrades are more expensive than anticipated, and also revealing problem 6, we don't have enough electricians. The workforce shortage in electrical trades is a constraint on the pace of electrification. Jobs and Skills Australia estimates Australia will need up to 84,000 more electricians over the coming years. A faster electrification transition that doesn't invest in training the workforce to deliver, it's a transition that could fail. Problem 7, consumer trust is broken. Consumers don't trust the energy industry. Many don't understand their tariffs, many don't know if they're on a good deal, many are paying a loyalty tax. Energy Consumers Australia found that 58% of households only want a basic relationship with their energy system. They want a fair price, reliable supply, good service. Keep the lights on. They don't want to become energy traders. They don't want to decode tariff structures, and they don't want to shop around constantly to avoid being ripped off. Yet the energy retail market routinely rewards disengagement with the loyalty tax. Choice estimates the average consumer loses around $430 a year simply by staying on the same plan. The AEMC this week released its final pricing review report, but they stepped back from banning the loyalty tax outright, and they opted instead for requiring retailers to notify long-term customers how much extra they've paid. Whether that will be enough is debatable. What's not contested, though, is this. As energy systems become more complex, batteries, EVs, time-of-use tariffs, virtual power plants, demand response, the information burden on consumers grows, and it's overwhelming. If people don't trust the system, they won't engage with it. And if they don't engage with it, it'll be difficult to realise the full potential of distributed electrification. Which means trusted, knowledgeable installers are key to this transition. Problem 8, businesses are missing. I focus largely on households because that's my world I'm switched on, but the electrification of businesses is lagging and the opportunity is enormous. A recent IEFA analysis found Australian businesses have installed only around 5.6 gigawatts of commercial and industrial rooftop solar. That's despite consuming a lot more electricity than households. The estimated potential is around 28 gigawatts on the commercial rooftops alone, and much more if you include agricultural buildings. In other words, Australian households have largely embraced rooftop solar. Australian businesses have barely scratched the surface. Problem 9, we're missing the boring stuff. I run a series on Switched On which I call How I Electrified. It's stories of how real people have made the transition to all electric homes, and people love hearing how other people have done it. One conversation I had recently was with Anna and Michael in Fitzroy North in Melbourne. Their electrification journey took 25 years. And what struck me wasn't the battery or the solar or the induction cooktop that they installed, it was where they started. Insulation, draft proofing, double glazing. They wanted to make a cold Melbourne terrace comfortable to live in. So before they electrified, they reduced their demand. Before they installed batteries, they made the house perform better. The result is a home that's healthier, quieter, more comfortable, and dramatically cheaper to run. Householders want comfortable homes. It's an obvious point, but it can easily get overlooked in the race for new appliances. Insulation vats don't get a press release, unless somebody dies. But they're doing a big chunk of the work in many of the electrification stories that I hear about. Efficiency also matters for emissions. The Energy Efficiency Council's modelling, based on ClimateWorks analysis, found electrification and efficiency together are Australia's biggest demand-side abatement opportunity to 2035. Of course, a heat pump in a well-sealed home is an unambiguous win, but a resistive heater in a leaky one will barely move the dial. Efficiency is what turns electrification from a coin flip into a win. That same modelling found efficiency can offset up to a quarter of the extra demand electrification would otherwise create. A well-insulated, well-shaded home needs a smaller heat pump, fewer panels, and a smaller battery. The cheapest energy is the energy you never have to generate, store, or buy. So, what needs to happen now? What would a path forward look like? Well, finance that reaches everyone, national rental standards, real solutions for apartments at scale, a managed transition off gas, open standards for connected energy devices, efficiency, not efficiency eventually, investment in the workforce, and a fix for the trust deficit. The global energy shock that's been unfolding this past year has reminded us why pace matters. The homes with solar on their roofs, batteries in their garages, and EVs in their driveways are sleeping better at night than those still dependent on fuel priced by people on the other side of the world. We have proved that electrification works. We have proved that consumers will lead when the conditions are right. The question is whether governments, industry and market institutions can keep up, and whether we can make sure the people who need this transition most aren't the last ones to benefit from it.
Yes.
If we get this right, we won't just have cleaner energy, we'll have cheaper energy, healthier, more comfortable homes, more resilient communities, and a future that belongs to all of us. Thank you.